Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, and here with my co-host, who may sound a little bit like Elvis Presley, Chris Viva McNulty.
Thank you very much. On today's episode, Mark and I will be talking with Jared Spataro, a corporate vice president for Microsoft 365 marketing.
That is right. We are going to be pulling from Jared's brain and dig into something that's quite new, something that's a new category. It's a new Microsoft brand. And nice thing is for this podcast and for the value to our customers, it's something that builds on the SharePoint platform. And in our notes, I put in a plus because obviously it's a little bit more than the SharePoint platform, but it builds off a lot of that value. So we're extending current capabilities with some more benefit, less interruption. But I might go on, but Chris, what is this thing that I'm alluding to?
Earlier today, Satya Nadella and Jared announced Microsoft Viva. Microsoft Viva is our new branded set of experiences for employee experience, along with being an integrated platform that helps people bring together what have been different point solutions that they may have had, along with Microsoft's innovations there, all delivered through Teams. So this is something that's really exciting. It's bringing together investments from across SharePoint, WPA, and Project Cortex, everything that we've been focusing on with learning, really to focus organizations on the people at the center of this. We know that the last year has really accelerated a lot of digital changes in the nature of work. And whatever we go back to, hopefully soon, is likely to look substantially different than it may have looked a year and a half ago. And so that acceleration, we know from talking to our customers, looking at how people work with the data, just how people spend their days going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, can take a real toll on people, on their well-being, their energy level, their sense of connectedness. And that's what's really led to our creating Microsoft Viva. Our motto is to empower people and teams to be their best. So we really have a tremendous number of people and customers who've been working on this throughout, and we're just so excited to be able to have Jared give you his perspective about what Microsoft Viva means for you.
Yeah, we mentioned that this builds off of a lot of existing technology. It really takes it to the next level. You had mentioned one acronym, WPA, which is the Workplace Analytics, and that sits alongside the My Analytics. So that value of knowing how you're spending your time, knowing how your team is spending their time, and to be able to derive a lot of insights. That's one of the modules, Viva Insights. The same is true for what you've been working on, Chris, pretty closely with topics. It builds off of a lot of the content services technology, metadata, the value of knowledge and whatnot. Learning and connections, the other two modules, take that same approach. I think learning is one of the kind of newer elements when you pull in the learning that we have and, of course, the learning that people build custom. And from a connections perspective, it really takes the real basis of this whole show, the intelligent intranet, to that next level for the values of culture and communications. So I'm really excited to hear from Jared his kind of top level way of viewing it, which I think will really give a sense of, if you're a BDM or a TDM out there that's looking, how can Viva, be something that will help us make our engagements with our employees even better, deeper, but have that trickle off beyond the individual to then how do we refine and harden some of the things that we call knowledge to make them easier to find and easier for people to go deeper in their information gathering or skill building. I'm really excited to hear Jared's perspective and, of course, to learn more about Viva, especially for our audience being a very new category and brand for Microsoft.
And for a lot of the audience, coming from that SharePoint momentum, the investments that we've made, people have been using SharePoint and related tools like Yammer and Stream to be able to build these knowledge systems, ways that you can put answers to people's questions in front of them. One thing I'm particularly excited about is that we're not just announcing Viva, which is itself huge and exciting, but today is the day when Topics, the knowledge system, which we developed as part of Project Cortex, goes to general availability today. So you can start trying it and buying it today. If you just go to aka.ms/viva/topics, we have lots of information there about that.
Can I tell you one personal experience with topics as you're moving into this GA motion outward? We are also using topics internally a lot more, or I see them, show up in a lot of places. And I wrote a news post today that was correlated with the publishing of the January roadmap pit stop. So just to share internally, the blog post, the conversation that I had with our friend Dan Holm and whatnot to highlight that. As news, but when I started typing in words like Yammer, because we talked about the Yammer communities and other things, it was really nice to see the word Yammer automatically became a topic. And when I hovered over it, because of course I know, some of the folks and some of the topics that we were discussing, the topic card did a really great job of pointing me at Murali as one of our engineering leads, who we've spoken to on the Interzone, and other things that I was really impressed to see. How is the topics experience? And I'm telling you, Chris, from my individual experience, it was great.
For the audience, right before we started this recording, Mark and I were talking about this. I showed Mark how easy it is when you're editing a page, editing a post, to just use a hashtag and be able to browse for topics that are already there to make sure that you can pull that in actively into your content. Even if you don't, topics is smart enough to look at the text of what you wrote and to supply the highlighting for you so you don't have to go through the extra calories of remembering to hit the hashtag. It's great. It's great that you're seeing that. It's something that Naomi Moneypenny and I and the rest of the team, we've been living with this technology for months and months and months, but as it's starting to roll and people have their first experience, it's nice to see.
Yeah, and I really just like seeing it through the eyes of somebody who is not the author, somebody who is going to be consuming my post or something that, somebody in Microsoft writes. And of course, for our customers to know that there are going to be some things that start to light up that you either program or the AI component is starting to do for you that really brings value to if I need to know more about something that I don't recognize, a term, an acronym, all the things that you use to pitch topics. Seeing it firsthand is a wonderful thing, but also to know how that carries over to anybody that might read my news post. If they don't know what Yammer is, that's probably a bad example. But if they don't, or they're looking to learn more, or who can I talk to about Yammer more, besides Dan, who I interviewed, there they'll see a lot of information both about the product and about who is behind the product, which again reiterates that value of putting in that more knowledge in front of the end user. There's one thing that we want to just make a small note as we start to turn towards listening and hearing from Jared. We'll cut to the interview here in a second. Is you may be asking yourself a pretty common question that we see asked on the internet, not the intranet, but on the internet. And that question is, who let the dogs out? While you ponder that question, Chris, can you just answer that in this particular recording with Jared? Who may have let the dogs out?
I know that my two dogs, Zyla and Max, frequently get excited when I talk about Viva. And you may be able to hear them from behind a couple of doors away just now, even. I know that Jared is also a dog owner, so we'll just have to see. We may just have canine delight happening all around Puget Sound.
Canine delight sounds wonderful. So why don't you come along with us to listen to Jared and possibly his dogs and their canine delight of Microsoft Viva.
So up next on the Intrazone, we are thrilled to welcome Jared Spataro for his first ever appearance with our listeners. So Jared, welcome to the Intrazone.
Thanks, Chris. Really good to be here with you.
Can you give our audience a little bit of guidance as to what you work on here at Microsoft? Yeah, we know that although it's obvious to us and we know you've had a huge impact, it would really, I think, help our audience understand a little context around what you've been working on.
Sure. I'm responsible for what we call the modern work solution area. We have the company divided up into these customer solution areas where we're trying to focus less on just individual products and much more on customer needs and markets as they develop and evolve. Modern work as a solution area probably has never been more in focus than it has been over the last 10 months or so as the work from home orders really went into effect across the world. And it product-wise incorporates everything from Windows to Office, certainly to Outlook, to our backend services and Office 365. More recently, over the course of the last few years, we pulled all this together into what we call Microsoft 365. The star of Microsoft 365, at least over the last 10 months, has definitely been Teams. And all of that kind of falls within the purview of what I work on. It's a really fun job. And the last 10 months have been pretty intense, I have to say.
I'd also be remiss if I didn't ask you a question. I know you take great care across our organization about asking people how they're doing. So let me ask you, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. As I reflect on what has happened over the course of the pandemic, it struck me over the last week or so that we've all had an amazing shared experience, but we've also had our own journeys. People have been affected in different ways. And in general, we have been really blessed and I'm doing well. I have, had a chance to, in the work I do outside of work, to be involved with lots of people in the community and see just lots of different types of lives and different situations, though. And so that, of course, my heart is heavy and weighed down for those who have been affected in negative ways, for sure.
I take that to heart because obviously being internal and on some of your broader calls when you're talking to the broader marketing team, there is a check-in that you provide that you have, of course, with the team supporting with our management, connecting with us. And I do think it's important to see how that you're driving that from at least our world top down, but to be plugged in, to be transparent, and to be asking those questions, I think is what we're seeing now. And I also know it's a little bit of a lead into a lot of what we'll talk about today, being centered around our customers and their employee experiences. Before we get into really the topic of today, you mentioned a number of areas that you focus on. We know it's pretty broad, but just as a recap for 2020, what would you say would be some highlights that we've released or we've started to disclose that has been resonating with our customers?
Well, as I mentioned, Teams has really been a runaway hit for us. And it's not a perfect product, and we're under no illusion that it is. There's still a lot of work for us to go and do, but we are so honored, I think is the right word, to be working together with our customers in a way that allows Teams to provide, this communications, collaborations backbone, really, for the work that they do. Over the course of the last 10 to 12 months, we released over 100 new features in Teams. Some of them have been small tweaks that make it better. Others have been really big adjustments to things like audio and visual quality. They've incorporated, things like Together Mode, which is a brand new way of thinking about interacting online. So there's been a lot there. That's definitely been a highlight for us. At the same time, one of the things that's been a little bit of a surprise that really has inspired us over the last couple of months has been the importance of analytics and data. I don't think I've ever been so aware of how important data is, especially where we can't physically see each other any longer. Data, if provided in a good way, used properly, can help us have insight into how people are doing and how we can help them, how our teams are doing. And that's been a highlight for us for sure, right? As soon as the work from home orders took effect across many countries, that was the biggest single request that we got from our customers was, please give me insight. I feel like I'm flying blind. And so that's been a really big change for us. And then as I look across the suite, across all those different apps and services that I referenced, a really big win from my perspective is pulling it all together into much less of kind of separate islands that you jump from, jumping from Word to Outlook to Teams, and starting to see a lot more coherent experience across those so that you really have this kind of digital platform in Microsoft 365 that's starting to emerge. And that's been a highlight for me.
I'd like to dig into the announcements that we made today. Revealing for the first time to the world, Microsoft Viva. Thinking about, the journey that we've been on, that our customers have been on. I'd love to hear you describe what Microsoft Viva can offer for employee experience in your own words.
You bet. We are very excited about Viva. This is the culmination of a lot of efforts. I would say it's something we've been thinking about for years now. 2020 and the experience we have all had has really brought it to the forefront. If the pandemic has taught me anything, it's just been a reminder of how important people are to the way a business or an organization functions. They are just absolutely central to everything that happens. I love technology. I love what it can do, but technology alone does not run an organization. It's the people that do, and technology is largely kind of a help. It amplifies what they can do. So if I take a step back for a moment, we have done a lot of qualitative work over the course of the last few months to understand what is happening out there. We've heard from employees that over 30% are saying that the current circumstances have significantly increased their feelings of burnout at work. Another third also said that they felt like they were having difficulty separating work and life and keeping balance between those two things. So there's definitely something going on where we're feeling, it's a new mode of work and where we are feeling the weight of it. And if I were to just characterize at the highest level, what is Viva, Jared? From my perspective, Viva is a new product that is meant to help people and teams to be their very best. And the analogy that we like to use internally, you'll certainly see some of this come out into our marketing, is that a long time ago when people were first learning to be performance athletes, the prevailing notion was you just worked as hard as you could, for as long as you could. That's the way you got good at anything. And then over time, the science actually taught us something different. It taught us that people don't function like machines. That's not the way we work at our best. Instead, our best is all about this idea of kind of a cyclical pattern where we really give everything we've got and some effort, and then we need to find ways to kind of relax and create space, and then we go at it again. And this idea of kind of that cyclical nature is so important. And we just don't feel like we've had technology or tools that help us do that. So that lays the broad foundation. I'm sure in a moment we'll get into the elements of Viva, but Viva is all about recognizing, boy, if we want to help companies, help teams, help people be at their best, we actually have to get down to the fundamentals of kind of human performance and how we do that. That's what it's meant to do.
I really like the idea of it creating visibility into kind of the what am I doing in the sense of how am I spending my time. It also helps bridge those gaps of how do I connect with others, my peers, the top down, bottom up, and that it's this holistic experience that's going to take in, what's good for the individual, what's good for the team, and of course, what's good for the company. But I think it's really grounded on from their perspective, not from Microsoft's perspective. So it's really giving visibility into, how things are operating and, what is most impactful at all those levels. Is that accurate to say it that way? Maybe to both of you, Jared and Chris, being kind of closest to Viva?
Absolutely. I think that what we have found over the decades is when you find the right things to measure, that's a process. Like that takes, real thought to make sure in any particular situation you're finding the right things to measure. But when you find the right things to measure and you surface up measurements, that improvement over time is much more possible. It's within reach because all of a sudden you have a way of being able to quantify, like, here's where we are as a baseline, here's where we want to get to. And that applies to all fields of human endeavor. And in so many ways, if I start at the personal level, which is where Viva is the most exciting, it's kind of like a Fitbit for work. It allows people to just get a sense for how they're doing. Just like a Fitbit, we don't take that data and, share it with your manager or share it with your team. That's not what it's meant to do, is to do stack ranking. Instead, it's meant to help you understand, well, how are things going? How am I using my time? How could I be better? And that's exciting. I think we're kind of born and wired to achieve. And these types of tools are designed to help us do that.
I was just going to say, I think I'm going to start counting my productivity steps, I think is what I heard. But Chris, your take.
I've been, as the audience knows, the principal product marketing manager for Cortex and Topics, which is one of the modules of Viva, is something that's been near and dear to me for a while. And in talking to customers, it's, one thing that resonates with them that I sure hope we keep at top of mind is we're keeping people at the center of this and getting the data to drive insights, to drive knowledge, to get people connected, to offer the right learning tools. It's really important that it's there to reinforce our understandings or to add clarity to places where we may not fully understand. And I am very close to Topics. I will say I am frequently awestruck by the kinds of insights which are gathered by the Insights module about how people are working together and when is it time to check in with people for one-on-one meetings, or the integration of like virtual commute and the attention that that portion of our team is paid to looking at employee well-being is just, I think, really thoughtful and very human-centered.
No, I love that. I agree. It's for us, Mark, I would say something that's interesting is it's a brand new place for us to go, for sure. And I hope we get a chance to talk about that and the inspiration for it. Because historically, people have thought of my business, the Microsoft kind of productivity tools business generally, as a set of, tools that almost have become like a utility. You need them, but they haven't always generated inspiration or excitement. They've been important and become crucial, but they also haven't represented innovation and forward-looking movement. And so, I've got a lot of energy for where we're headed with these things for sure.
Well, let's break it apart then, because I think if we take your energy and obviously the team's energy and what's being created and what's being put out to our customers, we've started to describe it as a system of experiences, and there's a lot in terms of the things that it'll offer our customers. But if we do break it down to its four main components in what's offered again as a system, as a connected experience for employees, let's start with Connections, Microsoft Viva Connections, which is focused on culture and communications. Jared, what role does that play in this solution area?
And backing up a little bit, Mark, if you don't mind, the thing that we see that's such an opportunity here is for what we would call kind of an employee experience platform. And we kind of see this evolving in the same way that we've seen other software categories kind of take shape and emerge over time. We've seen it with things like ERP and CRM, and they were very focused on different aspects of the business. This is about the experience your employees have, and again, how they can do their best work. And then now going down into the components and looking at Connections. If I project post-pandemic for a moment, over 80% of managers and over 70% of employees around the world in a recent survey that we did said that they expect that their company will have much more flexible work from home policies as we move even out of the pandemic. Those are pretty striking numbers. Then if we take a particular organization and say on any given day, let's just assume for a moment that because of these more flexible policies that you have, 10 to 20 or perhaps even more percent of your workforce will choose not to be in the office, not to be physically present that day. All of a sudden, for many organizations, this is just an incredible paradigm shift. And the reason that that's true is it used to be that, a lot of what we were able to accomplish in an organization was based on the fact that we physically were in the same location together. We bumped into each other. We were able to have meetings. We saw each other's faces. And Connections really is meant to deal with the reality that going forward, you literally may never have your entire team or entire organization in the same place at the same time again. Or if you do, it will not be a common occurrence. And so we believe that there's a need for this kind of evolution. We didn't coin the term, but the industry coined the term employee experience platform, so that you provide kind of like a digital connecting layer across people who are with you physically, across people who are in other places. It allows them to very easily kind of work together. And this Connections thing is all about kind of bringing people together on the same page. It is meant to be a set of experiences that you have in teams to make it very concrete. And those sets of experiences are meant to kind of help with culture, with getting the word out, with getting, the water to the end of the row, to use an old phrase from farming. It's all about kind of binding the organization together about the key things that matter to the group and to the individual in a way that creates a sense of belonging. And there's a ton of power. You could think of it as kind of the evolution of the intranet, but we've always had problems getting people's eyeballs onto an intranet. Here we're trying to leverage the power of the fact that we have over 115 million people per day, as we've announced a few months ago, using Teams already. And this kind of puts the connection experiences right in front of them in that context.
I see this being centralizing, into a tool that people don't have to pull away from. But I think also important in what I'm hearing you say, and certainly know of what's behind what we're offering, is it is always an ongoing two-way dialogue. It's not just, here's the message, you must read it. It's, we want to know, that you've read it. We want to know your thoughts on it. We want to see engagement. Is this resonating with the audience? I think it takes that conversation across the company, again, back to the, it could just be a chat. It could be a team meeting. It could be all the way up to now the connections across the company, but not have it be a vacuum where you're just dumping into the portal. It's actually a ongoing, again, that two-way conversation that I think is really engaging.
I think the philosophy with Connections about finding people where they are and in their new modes of working is important. I'd like to kind of extend that to, you started to talk about what we're doing with Viva as platform, our ability to be able to work with the data and work with the services that organizations have rather than just being limited in air quotes, Microsoft 365? Because we know that's already a broad set of services. How do you think about, our approach to the ecosystem as we're seeing it emerge around Viva?
Well, again, this space is a very broad space. Employee experience and the idea of an employee experience platform isn't necessarily new, but the way we've seen it develop has been pretty characteristic of the way new spaces evolve, and that is that it's been pretty fragmented. And so there have been all sorts of really interesting, innovative tools and services, but they don't connect to each other. Our entry here into this space with Viva isn't meant to be the be-all and end-all. That's not at all the statement we're trying to make. Instead, we're trying to say that in each area of kind of technological change over the last few decades, it isn't that one system dominates or creates, exactly everything that people need, but it does create a center of gravity, a point of almost like gelling together, of coherence from the incoherence that you can then latch onto to create order. And that's what we're trying to do. We think of whenever we go work on a platform strategy, we think about what we call the critical mass of capabilities that are necessary to kind of make sure that it has value and that it has draw and pull for the individual and for the organization. And here, we'll get to it likely, but insights, topics, learning, connections, those are the 4 modules. We've talked about connections. Those are the 4 that we think are kind of like that critical mass we need. But then onto your platform point, we don't believe that those are everything that people need. And we certainly recognize that heterogeneous environments are the norm and will be probably forever. So what we're trying to do is provide that critical mass of capability and of value, and then be very open and work proactively with the entire ecosystem to bring in and integrate and use all of the great innovation that is out there. And that's that is the key. I think if you look back into how these things develop, a closed approach never works because it just assumes too much about the single provider, and we're just not starting with that assumption.
You mentioned the other modules, so let's touch on those briefly here with the audience. So topics, I'm going to pick on next because it's obviously near and dear to my heart, and we officially made it available to the world today. I'd love to hear you describe topics to our audience.
You bet. And I think this audience, many of them will be familiar with the journey here. We had a project that we announced some time ago called Cortex that had, 2 large components to it. One of those components we already announced and put into general availability late last year. And we called that Syntex. It was a set of AI capabilities really wrapped around interesting scenarios and pretty innovative scenarios related to essentially kind of content management and thinking of how to get the most from content. This is the other part of Cortex. I think of it as Wikipedia meets AI is an easy way to think about it, but it's much more than that. It is this idea that what we're trying to do is to identify, categorize, organize the knowledge that is out in your organization, including the experts and expertise, and to make that available not just in generic form. Oh, Chris, you can go over and search this self-constructed Wikipedia. That already would be pretty cool. But actually to kind of put it front and center when it matters most, what we say is in the flow of work. So as terms come up, as references to the things that this topics module knows about come up in day-to-day work, it actually will prompt you and say, hey, I can tell you about that. I can help you get up to speed. I can show you who's working on it. It is a pretty mind-blowing set of capabilities packaged together. I think, there's a lot of room here for continued innovation, but just right in its current form, I think it'll be pretty mind-blowing to people.
Everything that we've been talking about certainly revolves around the individual. And I think the last 2 areas of Viva really do that by their goal and intent. So let's talk about Viva Insights. You mentioned the focus and the importance of analytics and data. How is this data-driven offering part of Viva focused on helping people be more productive and of course, we hope, improve their well-being?
Well, it kind of goes back to that idea that as we choose the right things to measure, based on science. We are hoping to make this less of an art, more of a science in terms of how to improve your personal performance, that it is incredibly helpful then to expose that to people and allow them to use it how they'd like to. So at its most base level, this idea of insights is that we help you with your personal productivity and personal well-being. We give you insights into, for instance, if you have a lot or a little bit of time to focus on your own work. We give you insights into whether or not you are having the right type of time with your manager. We give you insights into your after hours work, your work on email versus other types of work. I mean, a whole host of things that can help. And we're just getting started. We think someone think about in a very kind of like introspective way. Hey, how am I using my time? That's the resource I've got here. And am I getting the things done that the company is asking me to do? Well-being is a huge part of this because there's a lot of science behind well-being. As an example, just simply thinking about that amount of time that you have to actually take a step back and do your own work. We have great scientific studies that are very clear in their results now, indicating that employees who have ample focus time are actually perform better at work and are much happier at work. And that's a pretty amazing outcome. And so the system can actually help you out. Hey, let us tell you how you're doing there. If I zoom out kind of a click, if you will, we can then take those kind of data inputs, and we can de-identify them, and we can make them available to managers and leaders. Now, this de-identification process is really important because privacy from our perspective is a prime principle as we design kind of this new world of work and how data will play in. We think that individual data absolutely should be available for that individual. But when it comes to productivity and well-being, that it's important to make sure that we have some really important privacy principles. So zooming out, we have this opportunity to kind of aggregate that data and then provide insights into a team and an organization in a way that gives you a sense for trends and allows you to take action, but doesn't allow you to use it in any way that is about surveillance. And that's really important just as a design principle in the work that we've been doing. But a very exciting area. Something that I think will become very pervasive over time to help organizations function and to help people be at their very best at work.
So alongside people improving and being more aware of how to take care of themselves, be more productive, we have the fourth module, Microsoft Viva Learning, that's really focused on providing a natural way for people to skill up and grow at work. How would you just give a lens on what learning is and what it offers to the end user?
Yeah, if we contrast what we're delivering with learning with what has been the state of the art, I'll start with that state of the art, which is, Jared, you've got a whole bunch of courses you should go and take, find some time sometime when you're not busy and take these courses. There's always going to be a place for that type of kind of in-depth focused learning. It's going to be important. But increasingly, we find that because of the volatility of the environments that we all work in, we don't always, A, have time to do that, and B, things are changing so often, the amount of learning that we have to do is increasing significantly. So the learning component of Viva, the learning module here in Viva, is meant to kind of turn that on its head and say, what if we did just-in-time learning, in the flow of work learning, as you need it type of learning? What if we could take the learning assets that are available to you? Because companies generally have access to a lot of great assets, but then put them in front of you right when you need it, right at the time that you need to become educated on something. What would that do? And again, our research indicates that it would actually change the paradigm really significantly. It would again help with individual performance, make a big difference for the organization, and more importantly, kind of help people to be able to consume that very valuable content that's already there, but just when they need it, as opposed to kind of just be prepared for when they may need it in the future.
Jared, I think one thing we also should really emphasize, because I've found this in talking to customers, we can't emphasize it strongly enough, is that we have all of this innovative value that we're thinking about through Viva and delivering across those modules. But the ways that we're delivering it is by using that hub for teamwork, which is Microsoft Teams, is the vehicle for delivering that. I was wondering if you could expand on that or just emphasize that here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I mean, from our perspective, the moment is right for something like this for a couple of reasons. One, because we certainly see the need for it more acutely than I think we've ever seen it. But two, we have this amazing opportunity with Teams. Teams has kind of come out of nowhere. It was a twinkle in our eye, 2-3 years ago. It has become truly this platform for communication and collaboration. It is, I think, one of the wonders of the world in many ways, because it brings together these things that historically have been separate. We know the importance of video conferencing and have seen that take off, and yet it's alone is not enough. We think that, chat together with meet, together with call, and finally rich collaboration, that is that critical mass that's just incredible. So Teams, from our perspective, provides this kind of canvas. It's a framework. It's a scaffolding. It allows us to meet people where they are, because Teams is becoming an integral part of the way people work. It's just the way work is getting done across many organizations, and it's a habit that we know will persist post-pandemic. With that type of new approach to work, a very rich environment, very new scaffolding, we think Teams provides the very best backdrop we could have ever hoped for to really pursue these goals of individual performance, of individual well-being, of all the various things that we've talked about today that allow us to do something new. So it is like a moment in time like no other. The technology has come together with the needs of people in the market in general. And we just happen to have a product we think that has set the stage for us here.
So, Jared, last question. So, as a leader at Microsoft and certainly as an example out to the world of good leadership, what distinct value do you see as a result when you put your people at the center that Viva certainly entails? But from your perspective, giving them the skills, the resources, everything they need to, within the flow of their work. What is your take on that value for your sense of leadership at Microsoft?
Well, I certainly, first, I just would never put myself up as a leader to be emulated. I feel like I'm learning a lot every day and I'm trying to get better. There's some amazing leaders out there to learn from. As I think about what I have learned, going back to one of the earlier statements that I made, is it's just the central importance of people. And I think that I have been reminded of what a difference an organization and its managers and the people within it can make in the lives of the people that work there. That may seem like a strange point, for a business person to make, but when I really think about it, my boss and probably his boss have a bigger impact on my life than almost anybody else. They influence, the stress levels that are in my life. They influence how I'm feeling sometimes about myself and about kind of, where I stand in the world. I mean, there's a lot riding on it. To be clear, I wouldn't encourage people to put too much on their professional careers, because that's always up and down. But I do think that as we put people first in the workplace and really help them recognize how they can make the best contributions, it taps into something fundamental about who we are as humans. We all want to belong. We all want to do good work. We all want to contribute to a group that takes our contributions and is better because of that. And that's, I think, what Viva helps us to do. So from my perspective, it's one of the most rewarding things I feel like I've worked on in my career. I have learned a lot in doing it. I think this is the beginning of me learning a lot about what we can do together with the fusion of technology and people who really care.
Jared, thank you so much. We know that today is a big day, but a busy day. We really appreciate your making time to sit down with us. Lots of material we know that we've released today. We'll put links to all of those in the show notes, and you can visit and learn more at Microsoft.com/Viva. Jared, thank you.
Thank you both. Great to speak with you.
Up next on the Intrazone, events. It may seem that today, being such a big news day for us, we wouldn't have any events coming soon, but wait for it. There are plenty of activities happening in and around this great community of ours.
The first event that we wanted to focus on is called Get IT. This is a SharePoint one-day virtual conference. It's coming up on February 9th, and it's hosted by Brad Sams and Petri, and it's a full day of free learning dedicated to technical content aimed at IT pros who are looking to enhance their knowledge and skills for SharePoint development, migrations, administration, and utilization. And real quickly, I will highlight they have 5 Microsoft MVPs and, of course, SharePoint community experts that we know. So you'll hear from Todd Klint, Jasper Oosveld, Steve Goodman, Shane Young, and Liam Clearly. If you are a SharePoint IT pro, this is a great one-day virtual conference from the Petri team. Get IT.
And one of Microsoft's next big events coming up early March, the 2nd to the 4th, Microsoft Ignite. This will be entirely virtual, entirely available online. And we're expecting tens and tens of thousands of people to be able to join us for that 2-day event. It'll cover the gamut of everything from Azure through Microsoft 365 and Dynamics, everything in the Microsoft space with a focus on the IT pro. You can expect to hear about that at Ignite.
Shortly after Ignite is the Collab 365 Teams Global Con 5, so it means they've done it a few times before. And this next one is just after Ignite on March 16th and the 17th. And there's a lot going on. They cover a pretty broad landscape similar to Ignite across a lot of Microsoft technologies. I'll be helping kick off the productivity side of things. And there's a really nice 2 solid days of hearing for about best practices, a couple of overview sessions, and a lot of community learning that's being delivered all online, all for free. And it's just a really great team that always puts together a great event.
And then coming up later in March, the EU Collaboration Summit team with Otis and Spence and so many of our friends and colleagues from the UK and the EU are coming together for SharePoint's 20th birthday party. It is not a terrible team anymore. So they'll be having a special event coming up later in March, and that should be a lot of fun.
Can you imagine being Jeff Teeper right now, worried about the 21st birthday coming up? I mean, SharePoint going to its own SharePint. So anyway, the 20th birthday party will be pretty fun. But from an ongoing perspective, we've got 3 last few things that we want to talk about from an events perspective. If you like really deeper dive learning, multi-hour type workshops, the SharePoint Fest team is continuing both through February and March their row of virtual workshops. You can join Microsoft team members and Microsoft MVPs to learn about SharePoint, OneDrive, Power BI, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Lists, and they cover the Power Platform as well in different workshops. So there's a great link that leads. You can see a lot of their great trainers that they have, a lot of great topics. And again, if you want to dive deep for multi-hour hands-on type sessions, join in the SharePoint Fest virtual workshops.
And of course, SharePoint Saturdays continue, community supported. Just about every Saturday, somewhere in the world, there is a gathering of people, most of them virtual. So it is easier than ever for you to attend a SharePoint Saturday that may be thousands of miles from home. You can plug into those at spsevents.org.
And the same is true for another offering called Collab Days, which I think took the lead from SharePoint Saturdays to carve out some events that weren't just about SharePoint, even though SharePoint Saturdays go pretty broad as well. And we'll put a link in the show notes, of course, for everything. And specific to SharePoint Saturdays and Collab Days, click in, find an event that's upcoming, that piques your interest, has the speakers or the topics that you're looking for. And as Chris mentioned, for SharePoint Saturdays, it's a great virtual way to spend the time in a different networking environment with a different set of folks, in addition to what you might do regionally. We hope in the next few months, whenever we get back to that in person. But everything we mentioned is all virtual, easy to plug into, great event leads behind it, and a great opportunity to train up, skill up, and bring people in that you maybe are asked. You are their person that they ask questions. Invite them to the training, and they can start learning in a self-paced way as well.
And of course, there will be more and more events coming up throughout the year. If you are planning on attending one or sponsoring one that we don't know about, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to feature it on an upcoming episode of The Intrazone. We'd like to thank Jared Spataro for joining us today here on the podcast. Of course, we'll put links to everything we talked about and more into our show notes.
You can check out our show page at aka.ms/theintrazone.
And if you're curious about other Microsoft programs, visit aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts or adoption.microsoft.com as well.
If you ever have a question or you have some feedback for a future topic, please email us at theinterzone@microsoft.com or track us down on Twitter at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
Word of mouth is still the best way people learn about podcasts. So if you enjoy this show, help us help more people. Share the SharePoint love and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. and you've been listening to The Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 intelligent Viva Las Microsoft Intranet.